This is Mr. Harry Snodgrass from Mount Juliet, Tennessee, and I'm Bob Eisenstein. And Harry is going to tell us about his experiences in World War II and the concentration camps. So, Harry, you just go ahead and say what you want.
Well, should I just start when I went into camp?
Sure.
Well, it was about this time of year in '45. I can't remember the dates. It was in May, though, because it was a few days after that I think the war ended. And I was driving this officer who was, I forget whether he had made captain, he was a lieutenant, Gant, and we didn't know what it was that we went into. Well, I had never heard the word concentration camp mentioned, you know. And we went in there, and I've never seen anything, I hadn't seen anything in my life like this, and I haven't seen anything since then that would compare to what I've seen. I'd seen hundreds of soldiers that had died in battle, but these people had been starved to death. I could have picked up a grown man in each hand and walked with him. They wouldn't weigh 50, 60 pounds apiece. And some of the people were laying on the ground, and you didn't know whether they were alive or not. You'd stop and just kneel down and see whether they were breathing or not. But there was nothing that we could do for those people. And that's why I'm here today, to tell what I seen, because there was nothing that day that I could do for those people. And I remember going in the barracks where they lived, and it was, you make you think of a potato bin, where they had a wooden slats, like maybe 4 or 5 of them slept in each one of these. I remember seeing these oak buckets with this green-looking pea soup in it and some black bread. And this man that was telling us these things said that's what we eat, you know. They must have not got much of that to even eat, or they wouldn't have starved to death, you know. And this one man, I don't believe he was Jewish. It seemed like that he was like Lithuanian or something like this. And he must not have been there too long before we got there, because he was still able to walk around, you know, pretty good health. And one of the things that I remember, of course all this is faint now, but he took us into a building, and it would remind you of say a horse arena. It had a dirt floor, and he said that this is where they kill people at night. The ones that they, for some reason or other, they wanted to kill. And so I asked him, I said, well, why aren't the walls chewed up? I figured machine gun fire, you know, if he's going to kill several people or something, you know. And he said that's not the way they done it. He said they had them kneel down, and they come and walk behind them with a pistol and shot him in the back of the head. And if there was a gas chamber there, I don't know it. He didn't take us to that, you know. But it was, at the time I was 22 years old. And you know, a 22-year-old boy, he don't think much. But as you get older, you think about things like this. And I have wondered, as I got older, well, before I say that, the American Army tried to feed those people, but their stomachs had shrunk to where they couldn't eat. So they had to just start them over like babies, I guess. I don't know where they took them to from there, but they were putting them in trucks and taking them out of there. But as I've gotten older, back then, I'd laugh at a Jewish joke. Since then, I've never laughed at a Jewish joke. It's not funny to me. And I don't think anybody that ever seen anything like that would laugh at it. And as I've gotten older, maybe other people have never thought about this. And I couldn't specifically name the advances that has been made in medicine by Jewish doctors and Jewish scientists. I know they had a lot to do with the diabetes thing, diphtheria, and Dr. Salt, the cure for polio. And I've often wondered, like since I've gotten older, maybe the cure for cancer was laying there. Now, maybe nobody else has ever thought about this like this. But I've often wondered about this, you know. And those people, their only crime, if it was a crime, they were born Jewish. Well, none of us have any choice of what we'll be born. But that was their only crime, you know. I could have been born Jewish, I could have been born black, I could have been born anything. We had no choice about it. And that was their only. And I just, I was standing beside of a man that day at these bodies, and he said, I don't believe there's a God in heaven. Well, I had went to church all my life. He said if there was a God in heaven, said he wouldn't let human beings treat other human beings this way. And I didn't know what to say. I didn't have any answer for him. I couldn't say anything. I wished I could have, but I just shocked about it just like he was. I didn't say that, but I just, I don't know how long we were in the camp. Wasn't long, you know. Now, when we got there, there wasn't any Germans there. They'd all run off. There were 2 SS soldiers laying there. And they had been beat and hung by the strongest of the prisoners. And I have pictures. It doesn't show all of them. It shows one of them's leg laying there. But they had pajama bottoms on. And you could tell they were SS because right here was the tattoo of the 2 streaks of lightning at the SS. But that was the only Germans there in that camp. I really don't know what else I can say.
Yeah. What was your first impression when you walked into that camp? What was the first thing that hit you right in the beginning?
I said, my God, what has happened here? You know? I just can't imagine all these people stacked up there that had been starved to death, you know? Today, if this was to happen in Nashville, and there'd be 25 or 30 people laying along the road someplace dead, well, the news would be out there, and then the cameras and all this kind of stuff, you know. And here was hundreds of people just been starved to death, you know.
Did you see the ovens while you were there?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Part of you can see, some of the pictures I've got shows the ovens where they roll the people in on this railroad irons. Look like railroad tracks that they put in there.
Did the prisoners that were there have these striped uniforms on?
Yes, sir.
The jackets and the pants,
Mm-hmm.
with the bullseye on the back of the jacket?
You know, I can't remember the bullseye, but I remember the striped uniforms that they wore.
Did they take you to the mass graves that they had dug?
No. I didn't see that. I just seen the bodies and then the pile of ashes where they cleaned out the furnaces. Mm-hmm. And someone said that they used those to fertilize the ground. You know.
Were there any railroad cars visible? Did you see any of those cattle cars they hauled the people in?
No, sir. I don't remember them.
Mm.
But they had to be around there somewhere. Of course, you know, at that time, I wasn't looking for things like you're asking me, you know. They just, I don't know how long I was there in the camp. Maybe an hour, you know. But it just all of a sudden when we came to this thing, you know, just drove off the road and there it was, you know.
Did you say what camp it was?
Buchenwald.
It was Buchenwald.
It's at Weimar, Germany. We pronounce it, I think, like Weimar, but it's Weimar, Germany. And that's where I was when the war ended. Because it was just a few days after that the war ended. And then we went from there on to the Elbe River, and we stopped at the Elbe River so that the Russians could go on to Berlin. And I went to Berlin. The first American troops went in on July the 4th, which was the 2nd Armored Division. And we went in the next day on the 5th into Berlin. Never seen such a tore up city in my life. I didn't think I'd ever live to see the day that they could build it back, you know.
Was the camp, was Buchenwald like in the center of a town?
No, sir, it wasn't in a town. It was on the outskirts of a town.
A big wall around it? Barbed wire or anything you
Oh,
remember?
I think it had the barbed wire and stuff like that. But it didn't seem like it was real high, you know. It's just been so long, I never paid any attention to going in what it was until I just got in there and seen what it was. This, I didn't see any women or children there in that camp. Now, maybe they had a separate place for them, I don't know. But from what this man that I talked to, I guess they were political prisoners from other countries or what, you know, along with the Jewish people there too. But it's just, it's hard for me to think that this could happen, but we know that it did happen. And it could happen in this country too.
Has it had an effect on your thinking after you got back and could realize what happened?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I guess I compared it to the way the Japanese treated our American prisoners. From what all I've seen and heard of that was about the way they treated our prisoners, like the Germans treated the Jews in the concentration camps. They starved them, beat them, I know. But what's always amazed me is that Germany has always been known as intelligent people, cultural people, and how they could turn into this. They had to have ordinary people in the army, just like we had in our army. But how they got those people to believing that they was doing something great for Hitler, for Germany, by killing all the Jewish people. That's what scares me when you read the things that happen today, you know, where there's 20 or 30, to think what could happen if in the size of a place like Nashville, if you had 3,000 or 4,000 people like that. How that they can take control, and it's all through fear. That's what scares me.
Harry, how did you happen to go to the camp? Were you directed to go there, or you just happened on it?
We just happened on it. We just happened on it. We were going to, I can't remember, we were going to stay, or we did stay in these German army barracks there. But I don't remember, I was driving this officer, this Lieutenant Gant, and I don't remember whether he said turn in here, or wait a minute, what's this, or what, you know. We just drove in, you know. But undoubtedly, it couldn't have been long, very long since the liberation had taken place, because the bodies were still there and prisoners were still there, and excuse me, all the things.
It's left a lasting impression on you. That's
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's, well, I guess I can see why some people might say that this didn't happen, because it's so horrible. No one would want to believe that this could happen, you know. And I guess maybe if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I might doubt it if somebody had told me that this happened, you know. Because I have told people about this, just talking. And they said, well, I don't see how you could stand it. I thought, my goodness, all I was doing was standing there looking at these people. I hadn't gone through what these people had gone through, being starved to death. It would have been much more humane if the Germans had lined them up and shot them. But why they wanted to starve them to death is beyond me. A person that's starving can't work and produce no work or anything for you. It just didn't make any sense. So, and yeah, I had never thought about this until maybe a year or two ago. I read this article. I either read it or seen it or something, but anyway, what the story was about was that the Jewish people financed their own extermination. The German army hadn't appropriated any money to build these camps, to do all these things that took money. It was financed by the property and the money that they took from the Jewish people. I had never even thought about this. It had never entered my mind. But they financed their own execution. Of course, it wasn't by choice, you know. But it's scary to think as many people as living today that are saying this didn't even happen. When my generation is gone, and yours, there won't be any more eyewitnesses to this. So I just, I felt like I had to do this. Since that day, I couldn't do nothing for those people. At least I can do this much, you know. Maybe it might do some good. I'd feel like a coward if I hadn't come over here and done this. Although it's not pleasant. Much equipment, stockpile, in your life as it was in England for that invasion.
It was camouflage, though, wasn't it?
Well, some of it was, but some of it wasn't.
Yeah.
The thing that they had to camouflage most was the bombs along the roadsides and the ditches where there was trees overhang. That was, but they had out in the open artillery guns, tanks, half-tracks, jeeps, in those fields as far as the eye could see.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why they couldn't the Germans wouldn't have seen it. Yeah. You know. Yeah. I guess it's so much they couldn't camouflage it.
I guess so. Yeah.
It was.
I know for Anzio, when we were training with Anzio with the Navy, they had all that equipment. It wasn't camouflage; it was just sitting there. Mm-hmm. It's amazing, you know.
Yeah.
All the secrecy and.
Yeah, Ms. Snodgrass, what you can do is just kind of. Well, I'm shooting a real tight picture of that, so you don't have to worry. But tell us what this picture's of.
This is the picture of the ashes from the bones that came out of the furnaces, and we were told that they take from here and put it out on the land, fertilize the land.
How many did you saw the furnaces? How many did you see there?
If I remember, it seemed like there were. I'm guessing maybe 5 or 6. But of course, we just took the picture of the one there, you know, showed the wheels and where they would go in there.
Did you see, was this the only pile that you saw? Were there a lot?
Yes, and no, that was the only pile of ashes that I seen.
Since there's not really anything in that picture to give it much scale, how tall would you say that was?
Oh, it was maybe 4 or 5 feet high. I got a pickup truck could have probably hauled of what was there.
And could you pick out anything that you can identify in that?
No, it was just small pieces.
A statement
Well,
like that is
It
makes you think.
like I said, you were so helpless that day. You know, I've been glad to give them some money. I've been glad to give them a K ration. You know,
Yeah.
but they couldn't eat. You know, and there was. Oh, I hated the Germans so bad that day. I hated them so bad that the next day, I believe it was, that I was by myself in this Jeep. For what reason, I don't know. But this lieutenant came out of this building where they were cleaning it up for the Americans to use. And he had this German woman with him. And he wanted to know if I would take her to the hospital. I said, sir, if you want to go with me, I'll take her. I wasn't going to do it on my own. So he said, all right. And he got her in the Jeep. And I drove as slow as I could, hoping that she would die before I got her to the hospital. That's how I hated her. I said, if you die, you can't ever have another German, you know. And we took her to an American hospital, and they wouldn't take her. So we had to take her to a German hospital. I don't know how far I drove. It was in the city or something. And we unloaded her, and laid her on the ground, said, there she is, and drove off. You know, now I couldn't do that today at all. But I could then, after seeing that, what they had done to those poor people in the concentration camp.
Tell me about this picture.
Well, this picture is inside of the barracks where they lived. You see some of the people here, and then some of them are still laying. They had, I believe it was 2 tiers of them. And they're what you would call today is like a potato bin. It was like maybe 4 by 8 or 6 by 8 with planks in it. And they had, I think, a blanket. And there was a little partition like maybe like this between them. And they just rows and rows. And that's where they slept.
This building wasn't much shelter, was it?
No, I'm sure it was cold in there. But if you're starving somebody, you don't care if they're cold.
And there were no curtains or anything for privacy. It's just.
I didn't see any, if they were.
It's pretty much void of human comfort, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. There's nothing like that. Like I say, if you're starving somebody to death, you don't care whether they're cold or hot or comfortable or whatnot.
Were there any bathroom facilities in that building?
And I don't remember seeing them. There might have been bathroom facilities outside there that I didn't see. I really don't know. And I hate to say something, you know, if I'm not sure of it. But it didn't make you feel good. I know that.
No.
But coming home, we came home after the war was over from Le Havre, France, on a victory ship with 1,500 people on it. Took us 13 days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What year did you come back?
45.
45?
See, I went on to Berlin. I left Berlin in October, latter part of October. But I was discharged in November. Took 13 days coming back.
Tell me about this picture, Snodgrass.
Well, this picture was just, I don't know why that they were laying here, because next to this building here, because it wasn't close to the furnaces. There's some other bodies that show that it was close to the furnaces. I don't know why you'd think they'd have stacked them close to the furnace, but they didn't. But I couldn't tell, I didn't see any of these people here that looked like they had been shot, you know, that they had just died from starvation.
What kind of clothes did they have on?
Well, just a few, what to look like tattered clothes. Part of them didn't have any clothes on. Here's, I'm not sure about this scene, this right here. I think maybe it'll show it in another picture. It could be of the German soldiers that were laying there. It looked like they had pajama bottoms on. But these here they're just people who just starved to death, just by looking at them.
Is there any odor connected with that?
Not much. Not much. There was some, but not as bad as you might think, you know. And you know, I've wondered about that maybe they didn't have enough flesh on them to start to degenerate. And it wasn't hot. It was still cool, you know, then. In May over there.
Could you, how long do you think those people have been dead?
Well, I would guess maybe a couple of days, you know. I don't know how fast that they put them in furnaces after they died, you know. They might have been dead longer than that. I really don't know.
Was there any lime or anything thrown on them to, you know,
No, sir.
put down?
I didn't see any. I was in a temporary cemetery one time where they was burying American soldiers, and they had lime scattered on the ground, keep down the stink.
Tell me about this one.
Well, this one is one of the furnaces. This big hinge here, that's the door that closes on this. But they had like a rail coming out here, and was really on top of these wheels here. And they put the bodies on and just pushed them into the furnaces here. That's the bones still in this furnace here, where they had burned up. But like I said, I don't remember how many furnaces were there. I'm sure there was more than this one. But
Did they put more than one body in at a time? Do you know?
I really don't know, because like I say, I was standing here and I could just stand there and see that pile of bones there. It's
Did you have a pretty violent reaction to that one, didn't you?
yes. Sometimes I don't know which made me feel the worst, seeing those bodies just laying there or the bones, you know. It's just hard to explain.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain.
Talk about this one.
Well, this was of course, a different pile of bodies, and right here is a German SS soldier laying here. You can see he had on pajama bottoms. He didn't have any top on, and then there was another one laying right beside of him that didn't get into the picture, but there was two of them there, and of course you could see that they still had plenty of flesh on this, so they certainly wasn't prisoners. But what identified them as SS troops were, in the middle of their chest is tattooed 2 streaks of lightning. And each one of them had that. The strongest of the prisoners had killed them, I guess the day the Americans had got there. Some of those prisoners, of course, hadn't been there long. They were still strong, you know, but they had been beat in the face and they had been hung. I didn't see where they'd hung them from, but the prints of the rope were still around their neck, you know. But that's the only 2 Germans that were in that camp, were those 2 SS.
Were those bodies as badly decomposed as the other pile of bodies you saw?
No, sir. Mm. Mm-mm.
Were they clothed? Would they have uniforms?
No, sir. They had on pajama bottoms, and that's all.
Mm. No, I mean the pile of the.
Oh,
the rest of
well, most of these had some clothes on. They hadn't took the clothes off of them yet, I reckon. And some of them looked like they didn't have any clothes on them. You can see here. But of course, these 2 here, they must have happened at night or early morning or something, because they were sleeping in just pajama bottoms. You know.
And that building in the background, is that one of the crematoriums, or is that just?
You know, I'm not sure what that building is. You just wasn't paying any attention to what was what. You know.
I'm sure it was difficult to take it all in.
It was. Yeah, it really was. You know, when you're 22 years old, you just don't. You know, I didn't know anyone would ever someday ask me about this. You know, I didn't even know that about the pictures that this lieutenant had made about 15 years ago. When I was visiting with him, I'm glad I did see it, you know, but not that I got any joy out of it, but at least people can't tell me it didn't happen, you know. That's what I think about.
Tell me about this picture.
Well, now these people here, I don't think hardly any of them had any clothes on. Now where or why it made a difference, maybe they had taken the clothes off of them or not, but they were just near skeletons, just skin and bones. You see this person, this man laying on top here. Now he was a pretty tall person, you can tell by that picture. But they just, it looked like they just throwed up there, you know, just like his cordwood you were stacking, or didn't care whether it was neatly stacked or not. That's just the way it looked like whoever throwed them up there ended.
Now, was that near the crematorium?
I believe it was. I believe it was. Maybe they took the clothes off of them before they put them in there, so they would burn up the clothes. They could use the clothes again, you know. Because I never seen this with my own eyes, but I've heard they certainly took the gold teeth if they had it. They didn't lose that, you know. They sold, they even got money for it. I used to have financed this thing.
And there was no order with this pile.
I can't remember, but it wasn't like being around a cemetery where American soldiers were being buried in August, and some of them had been laying there for a week. There was more odor there than there was there, because these soldiers, they wasn't starved to death, you know. And that's the only explanation I can think of in my mind, that there wasn't this much fat to degenerate, you know. Now, I could be way off on that thinking too.
Good looking fellow.
I had hair back then too. You know, I had a full head of hair when I went in the service, and when I came out. And somebody said, well, maybe it's because you wore a steel helmet a lot. Well, I did wear it every day about 2 years. But other people wore steel helmets and they didn't lose their hair. So I guess I'd have lost my hair whether I'd ever been in service or not, you know. I had a kid brother that was bald-headed like me. He was in Seabees. But my daddy had hair, you know. So I guess it's just a heredity thing, I guess. But I know when you got used to wearing that helmet, you felt naked without it on, didn't you? You sure did.
How old were you in that picture, Harry?
Let's see, I was 23. I was discharged when I was 23. Been in 3 years. Talking about anti-aircraft, there's a fellow that lives out Mount Juliet. It's in ESU last November. They invite veterans over there, and the National Guard puts on this thing, and they feed you hot dogs, hamburgers, and drinks, you know, invite you to stay for the football game. But before the football game starts, after you eat and all, you march out on the field in units, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, you know. And this time, there were 2 Medal of Honor winners there. I have never in my life, until then, had never seen a man wearing the Medal of Honor. But there was 2 men there. That one of them was from Clarksville, Paul Huff, and he had won the Medal of Honor in Italy. He was with the 82nd Airborne. And this other fellow had won the Medal of Honor. He was with an infantry regiment, and it had also been in Italy. But he was in a wheelchair, and I can't call his name, but he was from Chattanooga. But he wasn't in a wheelchair because of the war. He said that he had been up walking around running a pretty good sized company. What he mentioned, $3 million a year business, until a couple of years ago. And then he come down with this multiple sclerosis.
Is there anything, Harry, that you want to say any more about your experiences that you want to have recorded?
No, sir. Well, maybe one thing that I think people need to judge people on what kind of a person they are instead of what kind of nationality they are. We had no choice of what we'd be born, but we do have a choice of what kind of person we'll be. That's what I gather from all this.
Well, that's quite a message to leave with people.
How do you feel about Germany getting back together? Does that worry you? Or?
I have mixed feelings about that. You know, there's not many things that you remember when you're young, but in 1939, there was a magazine published in this country with the name of Liberty Magazine. And I guess that's when the Germans had started into Poland. There was an article in there, and it said that wherever a German put his foot, that was German soil to him. Now, why have I remembered that all this time? That's what it said.
Have you been back there since the war? Have you gone back?
In '84, I went back for the 40th anniversary of the Normandy invasion, and we were in London like 2 days, and then we went down toward the coast. We stopped at Tidworth. Well, that's where this 29th Infantry Division had trained at Tidworth, England, and they fed us lunch. The nicest thing to us. It wasn't like you'd think of Army food. It was like something you'd eat to Hyatt Regency, something like that, you know. And I asked this fellow that was our driver, he was British, his name was Bryant, what his last name was. I said, Bryant, I said, I bet these boys resented us stopping here on Saturday. I said, they would have been home for the weekend. And he said, "Oh no, Harry," he said, "that's not the way they felt about it." He said they felt like it was an honor to get to fix lunch for the American soldiers that have been here in World War II. They really impressed me, those people did.
Would you like to say anything landing on Omaha Beach?
Well, things had calmed down whenever I got there. I mean, they were still firing and all this, but I didn't go in D-Day. That's the boys that deserve all the credit, because I'd go to a reunion each year in Salem, Virginia with the 29th Infantry Division. They made me an honorary member of Company D, 116th Regiment. And those boys went in D-Day. The 116th bore the brunt of it. And I think they lost about 800 killed and wounded of that regiment. And there near Salem, about 20, 25 miles away, is a town named, what is the name of that little town? No, well, there's no my own name. But there were 23 boys from that one little town killed at Omaha Beach that morning. And 2 of them were brothers, the Hoback brothers. And their sister comes to this reunion. I read different accounts of it. There's one boy, I call him a boy. A few years ago, he was the youngest man there at the reunion. He was 60. And he's a Catholic priest in Ohio. And he comes to this, David Sylvia is his name. And I read about him in this book, The Longest Day, that Cornelius Ryan wrote. And I never asked him, did he make a vow that that's what he was going to do. I just wondered if he did, but I never did ask him. But it told in this book that when he stepped off the landing craft, that they killed a man on both sides of him. He fell into the water, and his rifle stuck in the sand. And he got up, and he started running toward the hill. And he could see the machine guns firing at him down there. And he couldn't shoot back because he knew he had sand in the barrel of that rifle. And it told that whenever he got to the top of the hill, I read different accounts of it. There's one boy, I call him a boy. A few years ago, he was the youngest man there at the reunion. He was 60. And he's a Catholic priest in Ohio. And he comes to this, David Sylvia is his name. And I read about him in this book, The Longest Day, that Cornelius Ryan wrote. And I never asked him, did he make a vow that that's what he was going to do. I just wondered if he did, but I never did ask him. But it told in this book that when he stepped off the landing craft, that they killed a man on both sides of him. He fell into the water, and his rifle stuck in the sand. And he got up, and he started running toward the hill. And he could see the machine guns firing at him down there. And he couldn't shoot back because he knew he had sand in the barrel of that rifle. And it told that whenever he got to the top of the hill, that his pack had been shot off of him. There was holes in his canteen. He had been hit twice in the back, and he didn't even know it. I think he was 18 years old. That's Cornelius Ryan wrote that. Of course, that book, The Longest Day, whether you've ever seen it or not.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned Ernie Pyle. Were you with him?
On the ship, on the LST 392, he came on it June the 4th, and then they told us that night of June the 5th that the next morning was the invasion. We'd already been in the marshalling areas and everything, but they didn't tell us. The only thing they told us in the marshalling areas said, you people have been chosen for part of the task force for the invasion of the continent. And they fed us fresh eggs for breakfast and chicken and steak for dinner and supper, you know. But we was on this LST a couple of days, and then Ernie Powell got on, you know. Then we figured, well, this is it, you know. But after when we got over there, we drove on off the LST on this Rhino. The Seabees were operating it. It's just like a flat barge with the engine on each side in the back, pushing us toward the beach, you know. And this buddy of mine, Westcott, he mentions this boy's name in this book that Ernie wrote, Brave Men. He mentions Westcott, that he was his driver, you know. And they drove off in the water, and I followed them off in this Weasel that I was driving. So, of course, we talked to him. He's the nicest fellow in the world. He couldn't praise the infantry too much, and I admire him for that. He said the infantry lives like an animal, fights like an animal, and dies like an animal. And I believe that's about as good a description. The things that I've done a lot of reading about the war since I retired from work, and that's where they lived in Italy, and those mountains, and the men had to try to carry those supplies up in those mountains because the mules couldn't even carry them. It was too slippery and all for the mules, so the American soldier done it. That's rough. Ernie said that he was writing what he would write so that the people here would know what their sons and husbands were doing and was going through. He also told them, he said, the boys that left your hometown are not the same boys that left. He said they become hardened killers. Of course, that's the aim of what the Army wants you to be, you know. The war will get over as quick as you kill all the enemy. So, it's a sad thing, but that's the reason we have freedom in this country today. It didn't come cheap. But a lot of people think that it just come along and happen, but I don't believe it. It always seems like there's always somebody somewhere that wants to take your freedom away from you. And if you're not willing and able to fight for it, they'll take it. Sad fact.
I think that'll do it.
I think that'll do it. Yeah.